Well.
Start recording. Okay, and just before you start, Nikita, I'll put all the links in the chat, and the video will be online on our YouTube channel after. And please, everybody, turn your mic off and camera off. Thank you. Up to you, Nikita.
So, well, I'll start, well, I will start a bit with my background, because as I said, Matthew, I'm a PhD student in economics and econometrics, as well as applied statistics and mathematics here in Grenoble. And only recently I started working with RStudio, and use it for statistical modeling. So it was during my master degree that I've learned about R and started to use it. And for me, the main problem was that nearly everyone, please, can you switch off the mics?
Yeah, I'm muting people off. Sorry about that.
Well, fine.
I think it's better now.
And so for me, the main problem was that nearly all teachers, they use RStudio, and nearly everyone in university uses RStudio. But for me, it was not the optimal solution. And because of my workflow organization, because of many different subjects and many different languages that we use during our courses and that I'm using still, the RStudio was not the optimal solution for me. And so I started to dig a bit around this, and here comes the idea for this presentation. So as I have a bit of experience with different tools, and probably for all of you, it will be interesting to see the alternatives for RStudio and alternative workflow organizations. So let's start. I'll start with the presentation of the, this is the statistics from the Stack Overflow annual review on the practice and the uses of different tools and IDEs by informaticians and all the people who work with code. And as you can see, there are many alternatives and many code editors, some of them very popular, like Visual Studio Code, which offer many different possibilities for and are compatible with different languages, and other like, for example, RStudio, which are somewhat restrained to the target auditory, which use one or several languages. And consequently, we may roughly divide all the editors and all the workflows on three types. So the first one is simply using the text editor, like Notepad, and writing code and then executing it, which may be sometimes useful. For example, if you are working with a distance server, or if you are working with some code that requires compilation. But in other cases, this is not so advantageous. And for me, as let's say a data scientist, it's not the optimal solution. Next comes the notebook organization workflow. For example, I will present here the Jupyter and IPython presentation of the notebooks. And probably all of you who work with RStudio know that R Markdown proposes as well a solution of somewhat type of notebook, which allows to execute code directly and separated by cells, write separately code and text, add comments. But this is rarely the best solution for some big projects and for sharing, for example, information. And finally, there are the integrated development environments, or IDE, which, for example, there's the RStudio, which may be considered as integrated development environment, but there are some more proficient ones. For example, Visual Studio Code, about which I will speak a bit later. So here are the examples of what I was speaking about. So the first one is simply using a notepad. The next one is using a notebook, which allows to compile code by cells. And finally, a complete IDE, which offers the possibility to interact at the same time with terminal, console, the text file, the script of the code, see some extended possibilities, like, for example, the environment variables, the history, connections, Git integration, and the output. But let's start with the RStudio review. First of all, I would like to switch attention to the positive sides of RStudio and to why it's good and why there are so many people who use it and why it's considered the best practice to offer for students in universities the RStudio experience of R, a statistical language. Here there's the screen of RStudio, the default session, which every one of you probably familiar with. And as it's advertised in the RStudio website, the main advantages of the specific tool built specifically for R is the integration of all the helping tools like syntax collide, code completion, the possibility to execute our code directly from the source editor, or you see and explore the function definitions. But these, let's say, possibilities are offered by many others ideas, for example, VS Code or Atom. And we cannot say that these advantages are specific for RStudio only. Probably they are more polished and more up-to-date, but it's not always the case. What's next? Next comes the possibility to keep all the workflow together, but here I'm forced a bit to disagree with this statement. Because even if RStudio offers the helping tools, the documentation, the possibility to manage multiple working directories, integrated workspace browser and data viewer, all these capabilities are offered as well through some extensions in many other code editors. Finally, there's the possibility to author and debug inside the editor directly. So it's the integration of R Markdown tools, which allow to generate HTML, PDF, doc, etc., all type of files using simple R Markdown syntax, as well as debug the code. But again, these features are as well implemented in many other solutions. So as we can see, many of the advantages that are selected to advertise RStudio are not generally so advantageous. They are implemented in many other solutions, and let's say the only and single advantage is that it comes pre-configured and easy to install. So, for example, in universities, for students who have their first experience with R, it may be a strong side, but for me, it was not the case because with R and RStudio, it appeared to be too cumbersome, and it was not adapted for the workflow I had at the moment. So when we just started learning R, it appeared not to be the best solution to have such a powerful tool, because all I needed was a simple notepad and the console to be able to execute the code. Here's an example how it looks, but I believe everyone knows it. And so what RStudio is not at this moment, yes, it was a question or?
No, carry on. I think it was a mistake.
Yeah. Well, so what RStudio is not. So the RStudio is not a multi-language IDE. Effectively, it has some possibilities to work with, for example, C code or Python code, because there are some integrations and there are specific tools to work with these languages inside R or alongside R. But there are as well many languages which are not implemented in RStudio and to which it's a bit complicated to work. For example, for me, I had some struggles to use LaTeX alongside RStudio because I needed a separate tool for this. For example, probably many of you use Overleaf, but I prefer to keep everything in one place. So for me, it was not the best solution. And as well, there's the Julia language, which is a nice, interesting replacement for R, and probably it's not that well implemented in RStudio as well. So at this point, we switch to the alternatives. For me, in this presentation, I will speak mostly about Jupyter and IPython and Visual Studio Code, because both of these solutions are open source. Both solutions are free, and they represent absolutely different ideas about workflow organization and about how the things should go during the work. So first of all, it's Jupyter. It's clear and it's probably the optimal specimen of notebook organized workflow. So it has a simple interface, and the main process is running like a server to which we connect through a browser. And so the key advertising factors for this solution are, so first of all, a web application and the notebook documents. A web application, they include browser editing. It allows to edit the code effectively, but the problem there is that in the browser, some people find problems when they are working with many notebooks. And it's sometimes difficult to organize separate projects, separate projects or workflows in one browser. But it offers as well some advantages. For example, many, probably I believe it, some of the educational institutions are using Jupyter instead of RStudio, because it allows students to work on distant servers. It's easy to organize. It's easy to ensure that everyone in the auditory has the same abilities, the same connection, the same work environment, and it dismisses all the problematics which arise around the installation and working with their own computers for the students. As well, it allows to easily share the results, but you share them only in the notebook form. the possibility to display results of computation inside a notebook is at the same time a great advantage and disadvantage for this solution. Because the advantage, first of all, is because it's clear to see which code generated which results and which line of code does what thing. But the problem with notebooks is to keep track of what cells were executed at which time. With script organized workflow, it's easier, but with notebook, there may be sometimes confusions when some cells were not run or not run properly or not run at the proper time. But effectively for small reports, for testing of the code, for some simple study of data and some statistical model constructions, this may be one of the best solutions on the market. So here you can see the typical cell layout of the Jupyter with results following the lines of code. Probably you have seen it in RStudio as well, because RStudio offers this possibility to work with Markdown documents in the way we work with IPython notebooks. What's about the drawbacks? There is the great problem with version control. It comes from the fact that Jupyter notebooks, when they are saved, they save the results as well as the lines of code in a single JSON blocks. There's as well the metadata, and so it becomes too overcomplicated to keep track of the changes when we are using Git or any other version control solutions. Here is, for example, the raw format of the IPython notebook. And as we can see, there are many unnecessary probably information which is attached to the code. And what's more, this is that, as I've mentioned, the inline code rendering and inline expressions may be problematic to track. And on this point, I would like to switch to my preferred solution for organizing the workflow in the VS Code. And its main advantage is the versatility. So here is the screenshot of how it looks. It's plain, it's simple, but it has enormous potential because of the modularity and various extensions. Two of the VS Code selling features are, first of all, the simplicity of a source code editor, and the second one is the powerful development for coding, like IntelliSense, code completion, and debugging. It's available on all the platforms, which is not novelty, but because of all other solutions are as well as available on all the platforms. But if here I follow the track of the VS Code presentation on the Microsoft website, so it's well, some of the features will be not so much as features such. Then there are the possibility to well, first of all, the productivity, because it's one of the most lightweight editors which are based on Electron. For example, we may mention the Atom IDE, which is as well based on Electron and which was developed by GitHub community, but at this stage it's slower and it takes much more resources than VS Code. It supports enormous amount of languages, which is not the case of RStudio. And as I mentioned, there are possibilities to implement LaTeX workflow inside the VS Code. There are possibilities to even preview different types of documents without any need to switch to some side applications. For example, we, as a data scientist, sometimes I prefer to preview the Excel documents without loading them into the workspace, into the R. And so about the features, the strong sides are the modularity and the unlimited number of expansions. As well, there are some advantages in the interactions and the user interactions with the VS Code. With some simple shortcuts, we have the access to the inside the environment command line, from which we can interact with all the extensions, and it allows us to work without let's say taking our hands from the keyboard. Speaking about the R implementations and R integration into VS Code, there are several extensions and several packages which serve to this purpose. There are some general packages which help to introduce IntelliSense and highlights for the code, as well as the integration for our terminal and the code completion. As well, there's the possibility to preview the results as you do it in the RStudio. And as I mentioned, to work with different types of documents. On this point, I prefer probably to what's about them. So probably it will be best to do a short question answer session, while I'll be able to show some of the functionality of any of the tools, and well, so I'll ask you questions.
So what we'll do before the questions, Nikita, we'll let Nicola present a fourth solution. Is that okay?
Well, it might be, yes, it's a great idea, because then we will be able to discuss any of the solutions. And
exactly. And so we'll have all the questions at the end, okay? So maybe you can stop sharing, and then Nicola can start sharing.
To RCode, which is a new R IDE with specific features. We started the project 3 years ago, and the latest version was released 2 years ago. And we're basic. It was completely basic. So I present today the new version that will release next month, so very soon. So here you have an overview of RCode. As you see, we have a full tabulation layout in which you can drag and drop everything. So for example, you can have several files of RCode that are open in the same time, 3, 2, 3 or more. You can drag and drop them everywhere. So you can rearrange them there or there like that, or I'll come back here when I started. After, you have a file explorer for your project. Here we have a modern tree view of your files. For example, you can have a folder in which you can have your data and so on. Here we have an we have an R editor code, so in which we have the classic features, coloration, syntaxic, auto-completion, and so on. You can also add some help to your function. For example, here I add the help for the function, what it does. I use the classic oxygen syntax. Here I can put what my variables are doing. And so I can have the help of the function, and I can have the end completion of the function that displays the associated help. Here we have an history view. So in this view, what you can see is what you have executed. So it's classic. However, we had some information. For example, if I execute those lines, I can see what is a commentary. I can also see the execution time. Here it's not relevant, but if you do something which is bigger, for example, you can see that it is executing. And after we have directly the computation time written there. After we have the environment view. So it's also something that we like to have for R. In the environment view, you can see your R variables. You have the different types on the right. You can explore them. So for example, if you have a data frame or a data frame-like object, you can see what are the columns of the data frames and the dimension. If you double click on it, you can open an Excel view, like an Excel spreadsheet of your data, in which you can copy paste them in Excel directly, and actually it works in both senses. What I mean is, for example, if I want to modify this variable, for example, to test, of course, it's not for production code, but if you want to test something and to do it, after I can see that it is modified there directly in R. For the exploration of the variable, we can also look at a list. So for example, here I have a list view, so it opens a new environment. It's like a new environment, but it's associated directly to the list, in which you can also explore every variable. So it's not interesting there, but here, for example, you can have the residual of the regression, so you can explore it. And if there is list in list, you can explore them with a tree view because we not open another tab, and so on. So I have a complete tree view there of the list. What you have to look after, we can look, for example, at the search module. So we have a full search module there, which is also common, in which it supports regex expression if you want to use them. So if I want to look to my function, I can do it there, and I can also filter the files which support globe patterns. So for example, if I want to look only in function.r or in all R files, because it will look on every file there. We also have a package manager, but in our code, but I will not present everything else. It's very classic to manage them, of course. And after, some features that I find nice is that if you have a variable, for example, there, in one click, you can look what is an histogram of it. So you can look here. You have it was huge actually. It was 10 million of data. But here you have you can look at an histogram of your data. And you can also create your own custom graphics. Here, it uses the API of Plotly. And it uses the native JavaScript API, but you write them in R. So you write the same variables that would exist in JavaScript in R. You have a documentation at it. It's very easy. And if you do it, you can create Plotly graphic without the package. Of course, you still can use the package, but without the package in an easier way. And actually, it's the main thing is that it's very fast and it will be updated there because it's natively added in our code. So this closes the main first overview of our code. If you want to try the beta, you can download it on our website. So you can go there, and as you see, you have the last version, but this version is was released 2 years ago. So it's completely old from now, and there is a lot of new features there. So you can download it on every system. And you also have a full documentation associated to the software that you can look and how it works. For example, the graph. There is a free explication of how to manage from the graphic from Plotly to plugin. Oops, I close it. To plugin in R code.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Nicolas. Before we go on with the questions, could you just give some quick context on who you guys are and why you started this project? Maybe I missed it at the start.
Yes, of course. We are two only on this project. We started in 2013, and it was the first aim was to provide user graphical interfaces to R, but in which you do not have to code them. So you have a tool in which you easily create your user interfaces, because if you are only an R programmer, maybe you do not want to manage to spend a lot of times on your graphical interfaces, so you can easily manage them. And during this project, 3 years after, we felt the need to have a full IDE that we can embed if you want with this solution. And so the idea was to compute a modern IDE with the last features and that were available at this time. And so we built it. We started 3 years ago, and the first version was released, but it was, as I said, basic at this time 2 years ago. And now we prepare a full version that will be released in 1 month, but it's already completely stable. So you can almost completely stable. You can try it, and of course it's free.
Okay, very interesting. Thanks. So I'll ask you guys, so you and Nikita, the questions as we got them. Maybe you can stop the screen share, Nicola. So for Nikita, first a question from Maria. How long did it take you, more or less, to set up VS Code? And were there any particular pain points where RStudio was still better for your needs?
So, well, because for me it was like come and go from different ideas. I used sometimes I used multiple ideas at the same time. I tried them one by one, and so probably my experience with setting up VS Code will be not that representative, but I believe in 1 or 2 days you can easily set up everything as you need. Probably not to the point that all the aliases and all the shortcuts will suit your needs, but at least to the point that R is working and all the other languages are working and with all the extensions needed installed. So it takes not so much time, and it's particularly easy once you have every other language already on your path. Then when you install extensions inside VS Code, they automatically find all the needed points. But well, about what lacks inside VS Code, there were some points about package managers and connected things in the chat. So I believe for someone, the absence of well-organized package manager might be a strong drawback, but for me it was not so, because I'm quite familiar with console and I'm used to use console. So for me it was not a problem.
Okay, thanks. I think that answers your question, Maria. So two questions for Nicolas on our code. Does our code include version control, R Markdown, and help? And is it open source?
Yes, for the version control, if it's about the R, you can choose the R version you are using and the associated packages here easily. And so you can change the version of R, which just restart R. After the second question was R Markdown, there is an R Markdown support. So you can create an R Markdown file, and after you will be able to compute it and edit it. And so you have some support about it. And here I have, of course, to install Pandoc if I want to use it. So it's proposed and it will be automatically done. So if you do not use R Markdown, actually, there is no need on Pandoc. So that's why we propose it after. And the last question was about open source. So for this, there is not a public repository yet, sorry. However, we aim to put the code on GitHub early next year. So in a few months, we will put it on GitHub with a public repository.
Nice. Any other question? And you can take the mic if you want to ask directly.
I see a question about Electron-based. Yes, it is Electron-based. And now it is also R-centered. So you can edit every type of file. If you have a C file, it will work. You will see the highlights, the auto-completion, and so on. But the most idea at this stage, it's dedicated to R.
Okay, so I see.
AI?
Yes, go on.
So if I understood well, sorry for Nikita, about the Jupyter notebooks, the main, I got the impression that the main new feature, I mean, not new, but compared to RStudio, is the fact that it's online and that you don't have to install anything. Or did I miss some things that are very specific? And because, you know, notebook, you can work with them RStudio. And so for me, I had the impression that the most important difference was this. Did I miss the point?
Nikita, do you have an answer?
You are on mute.
Yes, I'm muted. So this point, it's important only if you are part of some institution, for example, and that you are a server where you can turn IPython with Jupyter Lab, and then it may be accessible from outside, and you can use it on any computer with tablet, for example, to code. But if you are more accustomed to work on your standalone machine, it's not the case. And for me, the Jupyter, it lacks a lot of functionality compared to RStudio. What's more, I believe many of IDEs like VS Code or Atom, they offer to port the functionality of Jupyter inside their IDEs and to work with the notebooks from IDE. So I believe I answered, or?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Nicolas, next question. Is RPGM an alternative to Shiny?
For RPGM, just to explain what it is, it's what what we started to work on at the beginning when I said we would like to create a user graphical interfaces without any the mandatory of coding them. So in this case, yes, it's an alternative. And it's not based on RShiny, it's completely independent. and it gives the opportunity to create graphical user interfaces that can be executed locally on your device or on a server, and in which you can have the widgets, you can manage the layout of your application, you can have some dynamism between every widget. And so it gives the opportunity to have a communication from the graphical user interfaces to R. And the nice thing is that it's very easy to develop, because you separate the R code that will execute the computation, the graphics, and so on, and the part with the graphical user interface that you can build directly in the software.
Thanks.
Just to show how it looks in a few seconds. Here you can have, for example, a graphical user interface that you can see. You can directly edit it. It supports HTML and CSS because it's web-based. And so you can easily edit your graphical user interface to manage everything and so on.
Okay, thanks. Nikita, question from Fodil. What are the non-R VS Code extensions that help you the most with R coding?
With R coding, so I believe one of them is the possibility to preview PDF documents inside VS Code. So, for example, when I'm rendering some presentations with R Markdown, I can directly view the output inside VS Code instead of some other tool. What else? Probably the possibility and all the syntax highlights for the LaTeX and the auto-completion for LaTeX, as well as all the functionality of, for example, overleaf introduced inside VS Code, so possibility to preview and see the output of text compiled documents. So I believe it's all if you're thinking about interactions with R directly, but there are as well many other extensions. For example, sometimes I use Julia, and so there is an absolutely fascinating package or extension which introduces all the advantages of Juno inside VS Code to interact with Julia. So I believe it's all. Probably as well, yes, all the packages which introduce the possibility to preview Office documents like Excel or Docs as well inside VS Code. So I do not need to switch between different applications.
Okay. Do we have any other question?
Yes, so about if R code as a package manager. So if you want to manage a package, you have a specific code tab in which you can double click to load and unload. You can also update the package directly there. And you can also add some package there if you want to get them from the current depository. And I think I misunderstood a question before. It was about version control. Maybe it was not on our version, but I mean Git or SVN, for example. There is currently a small Git integration, but it's not completely featured now. And so we will work on it because it's still a new software, a young software. So on this field, we still have to work.
Thanks. Nikita, do you ever use VS Code to execute code on the server?
Only for amusement. So it was only during some tests because I wanted to explore how it works, but not in my main workflow because I'm not working with so large files or with some necessities to use an external calculations.
So actually, I'll just hop in here because we have a session on January 14 on how to use R and a distance server, which I'm sure will be very interesting. So maybe if we have 10 minutes left, maybe we can stop for the question now. So thanks a lot, guys. It was super interesting. I'll put this video online and I'll just do a quick talk on how the R community can contribute to the COVID-19 pandemic.